Welcome guys, this is going to be the second part of our series of video tutorial that I'm working on for tips and tricks on JavaScript. And as if you want to follow me into Twitter, here's my Twitter account. Today what I'm going to do, okay, this is going to be our tip number 2. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about something called prototype. Understanding prototype in JavaScript is very important, because without understanding prototype we will not be able to write very robust application. The reason I decided to do this demo or presentation is because a lot of software developer, especially people who mainly work in the C# or Java, mainly in the server-side technology, and coming to clients and understanding the inheritance. It's because there is no classical inheritance. Of course there is a way you can write JavaScript in a classical inheritance term, but there is no classical inheritance. But like we are used to, like object, the constructor, the properties, all this kind of stuff. What JavaScript does is it uses a prototype inheritance. Okay, let's first talk about what is a prototype. So prototype is basically an object, a property of a JavaScript object and function, and that is created by using a constructor function. So I have very simple example here of I have a function called a. I have very simple function, and then when I create the instance of that function in this right here, that's what I mean by a constructor function. Okay, so like I said, this understanding of this little slide that I created is very important. So how to understand the prototype object in JavaScript? It has some hierarchy. For example, let's say I have on the top of the hierarchical chart, we have object, the prototype. Basically, any object, any JavaScript object that we create, they would be. So for example, in this, right, I have this arrow pointing, and I have this little object called person. I'm creating this person using JavaScript construct called JavaScript object notation. Basically, I have a person here with the first name John and last name John Doe. And of course, when we can create a similar kind of object here using this notation, we can create a new instance of object and give the property like first name and last name. They are exactly the same. So what happens is this: when we create an object like this, either using the JavaScript object notation or using the object constructor, they are basically inheriting. They will basically having all they are basically inheriting from object.prototype. That's what this arrow is trying to say right here. Okay, so this basically all the properties from here, from the object, will be inheriting. For example, some of the property like has one property. There's a bunch of classes and method. Not classes, sorry for that. Bunch of properties and method that comes from the parent object here, object.prototype. And this one is basically saying when we create a new instance of date object, it will be all the properties with the data.prototype comes, and behind a little hierarchy here. On the top is object.prototype. Okay, that is what we have. That's why I wanted to explain it to this diagram. Okay, next thing in more detail here. This example is I have object, the prototype on the top, and I create here a person object. And this is a little complicated because it has the object called person, and then I have address. I define first name, last name, age, and address. So basically the same idea, a little bigger picture, is that they will be inheriting from object.prototype. Whether I create using JavaScript object notation or using this JavaScript construct called new object constructor function. Okay. Okay, that's where we are in now. So let's look into one example of our first slide. So I'm going to close my presentation here. Now we're going to go into our code. Okay. So as before, for the coding purposes, I'm using I'm using my console for the PowerShell to execute the JavaScript code using Node, and then I have my code editor, which is just a Visual Studio code. Okay, here is I have very simple example, a constructor function. This is very important to understand. Here I have a function and I give a name as default letter. So basically I'm defining a letter object here and giving some property, the color as a white, default size of the letter by let's say 10 by 10, and the border thickness of this letter. Some basic property without thinking, okay? Just giving creating an object. So here, before using this letter, I'm using this new operator here. When we use JavaScript like this, that's what we mean, like we are using the constructor constructor invocation pattern. Basically, we are using this JavaScript function as an object. Okay. So let's see what happens when, let's try to, we can execute right here too, but I would like to show you an example in the browser. So I'm going to go into Chrome browser here and go into developer tools. And into the console, I'm going to paste this right here, okay. So let's first look into a letter object. As you can see, all we're doing right here by using constructor function, we basically define a default letter having property color white, default size is 10 by 10, and thickness. Let's try to understand the prototype. Let's see if we do default letter in prototype. If we expand, if we start, as you can see right here, it is a constructor function with the name default letter, and the proto property or the prototype of this is basically pointing to the main object called object the prototype. So here, and of course, as I told you before, this method, this object from all these properties and method will be inherited because of this prototype. Okay, that is what that's the very first thing that we have to understand the prototype. Okay. Next thing in our slide. Oops. This prototype is used to add properties and method to an object created by using constructor function pattern. So let's look at that example. So basically we have a constructor function. Now we can add a properties and method for that one. Okay, let's look at an example for this. Let me expand this one. Okay, I have the similar kind of letter here. So what prototype allows us to do is give additional properties and the method to our function. Here I define a function called dLetter, a constructor function called dLetter, and it has some basic properties here. Okay, and then now I would like to have some more additional properties. In this case, I would like to have the object contains some method like add sum and has some record or whatever. And you can also do here, I'm just adding property here. I'm just defining a method into the prototype of this object dLetter using the prototype and give a name of the method. And then basically this method, what this method does is just return the color property. It's a getter for that particular function, and here is a set color. This would allow me to set the color that's coming. So basically setting that color. And into line number 33, I'm basically creating using the new operator again. I'm using as a constructor function. So here in this constructor function, I'm creating the new instance of the letter. Okay, and then basically I'm gonna iterating over this object, this letter here, I want to go through all the properties. Okay, all the property of that object and just print it out. Okay, and then let's just, for example, let's just look at into output of this one. I'm going to comment it out, this piece of code for now. Prototype extension. Let's go ahead into our console, and I have prototype extension. Basically, I'm using the node into the command and giving the JavaScript file name. In this case, prototype extension.js. So basically, I'm executing this piece of code into the DOS prompt command. When I do this one, so what it did, as you can see, it started printing all the properties here. The first property of the object here, the color. Well, even better, let's print both the property name and the color here instead of just printing the value. So I'm going to print D and some concatenation here. Go ahead and save it, and I'm going to go ahead and run this one. So you will see all the property name. Okay, as you can see, the property color value is white, default size is 10 by 10, border thickness is 3, and around right here, remember, using the prototype, we added some function. We added some function like add sum and has some record and stuff like that. So all of them is a printing out, has some record. Here is a function, and here is another function another function called getColor. We added later, and it is printing all of them here into our DOS prompt. Okay, so as you can see, this is how we basically extend this is how we use the prototype. Okay, to basically, that's what this statement is basically saying. Prototype is used to add properties and method to an object created by using constructor function pattern. That is that example. And I have a couple of examples that why the prototype is very, very useful. Not only that, we can add methods, method or properties into our object using prototype. We can also extend existing objects such as array, string, or date, or number, or whatever. We can basically extend those properties. Let's look into that example, how we can do that. Okay, so I have some example of that. Some built-in type extension. These are very, very common. You might have seen these very you might have seen a lot of libraries basically uses these. It's always a good idea, like let's say how we extend a trim function. This is the most universal. I have seen this code everywhere. So we have a string JavaScript, the object here, and using the prototype, we are defining a trim method. So this is always important because like sometimes if your browser or if you are running your code in server side, if that method is already defined, you don't want to define because you want to use the existing method because that's already been tested and stuff. So it's always good pattern for us to make sure that if this method called trim doesn't exist in this object called string. Okay, string.prototype. That's how we extend. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to implement it. So how basically the idea about trim is we basically getting rid of the trailing and prefixes and so trailing spaces from both back and from the back and from the front, right? To do that, all we have to do is just we're doing a return. We have some regular expression here, the Unicode character. So anything starting from this empty string here, and then anything starting from empty string, we basically replace those with this single quote right here. That's all we have to do because here this is very important to understand. This refers to this particular string, and of course, as you know, the string has a replace method, and we just basically provide the regular expression. That is one example of how the prototype is used for the existing object in JavaScript. Let's define another object here, another method called starts with. Right. Well, I think that with the ECMAScript 6 or even with 5, most of these starts with tree may be already defined. So that's why it's always good practice to make sure we only try to implement if it doesn't exist. And the same idea here, I'm just trying to find out the string, whether a given string it starts with the, well, the given string always starts with the, it starts with some string, some substring. So basically I have a method, and this is the source string, and this is the position here. Okay, sometimes this code is basically, if the position is not given, it's always assumed as it's starting at 0, because the string is an array in JavaScript, so it starts with the index 0. And then of course, then I have an index. I just going to say here this refers to a string, and I call the index of method. Just basically pass the starting index and specify the position. If the starting it matches with the position that is given, then we basically have found this, right? It starts with, we verify that given substring basically starts with this string. Okay, that is the extension for a string. Let's look into I found this method really useful. This is an extension for the existing object called date. So I'm going to define a method here called add days, and this function takes the number of days to add into. Okay, so the same idea here, like maybe I need to have some sort of validation here, because if you pass here instead of day, like you pass empty string or whatever, if you don't pass anything, that's taken care of here. But I need to have the validation is also making sure the type of the input, that's argument that's coming in, is integer. That I didn't do that one because that is not important to this, to explain this one. So here is a days, and type of days is number. Then basically this here refers to a date. It's very important. I'm just call the set method and get the today's date, and just basically add as many days as I want. Before I add, I'm just to make sure that input is integer %, and return this. When I say return this, I'm returning the same object date here. Okay, I have just exactly the same idea for a subtract days, not that more important. And then I have some very simple extension for arrays object here. Here is array. I'm using the prototype I defined first. I mean, like you have seen this in if you have read the jQuery source code, you'll see a lot of method, very little tiny useful method out there. Extension method. Okay, so here I'm just returning this and giving the index at 0, basically returning the first item from the array. And the same idea for the last one here is this is my array, and the array has a length property -1, so basically the last item from the array. Okay, the last thing we're going to go into here in this particular example is I have okay, so this one is kind of useful. I have extension method, not really extension method. I have prototype extension for the number object, and then I define a method here called binary. So this one, okay, I have this one is a little involved, so I have like this separate method here. Okay, this is the whole implementation of that. Okay, so here is the okay. I will tell you why I had to write one more reverse method into my string, because I couldn't see reverse method, built-in reverse method, so I had to write it. But the need of this one, I'll show you why, because when I wrote this method called binary, so my idea is like I'm trying to convert any number that is given. For example, here I create this new instance of number. Remember, number is a built-in JavaScript object, and then here I just want to log. I should be able to say n1.binary, whatever binary I give, it should be able to whatever decimal number I provided here, it should be able to convert that number into a binary. Kind of useful. I don't know why, but this makes sense to this particular functionality to be here into a number object, right? So anyway, this is the implementation of this one. Very simple here. I'm just going to go briefly because that is not important. It's a number, the syntax same thing, the prototype and name of the method, and it takes a parameter. That's why I'm passing number here, assigning the number into this local variable and defining some variable that I need later. So basically I have a loop here. I'm just basically saying as long as this current number is greater than 0, just go in here inside the loop, do something. On each iteration I need to find the quotient. This is very important, method flow, because you just want to, otherwise if you don't do method flow, because when you divide it, sometimes you have some JavaScript division also contain the number after decimal, you get a non-terminating, you get a infinite loop. It's just very important. Make sure that is the case, and I find the remainder here, and then of course on each iteration I have to make sure the current number is the quotient of the number and collect the result here. Okay, and once I'm done, I have basically converted my given decimal number into binary, but of course I have to still reverse it. That's why, as you can see right here, this is a string, result is a string, and then I was able to call reverse right away. I was able to do that because I defined, like I told you before, I had to write a reverse method using the prototype. So basically I couldn't find, so this one is pretty easy, obvious, just a looping, starting from the, instead of reading one character at a time from the front, I'm reading from the back, so the reverse is that one. So that is that. That is well, let's try to run this one here. Okay, so I'm going to run this example here. Let's start with very simple number. Let's say 10. Okay. I'm going to say node number built-in type extension. Okay, even though I changed this number, but I haven't saved it because I had the old value. It was calculating for old values, how that method was working. So here, because in my input was 10, 5, 2, this is how I convert. For example, 10 decimal is binary 1010. I just wanted to make sure the implementation is working correctly. And if I change values here, whatever, I don't know, any big number, I don't know right away the binary of that number, but it should be able to calculate this one. As you can see, this is the binary representation of given number here. Okay, so that's why the prototype has a lot of, without understanding prototype in JavaScript, it will be a lot difficult to write very robust JavaScript code. So the next important thing, now this prototype allows us to create an inheritance in JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be a lot involved. This is the next topic that this is going to be my next video, that I will have a bunch of example here, and how the inheritance and how the prototype, all of them are tied together with JavaScript. Okay, that is what we're going to talk about in our next video tutorial. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video and learning JavaScript. It's really awesome.